The turning point in my life arrived on my 12th birthday. In the kitchen, where the morning sun streamed through the window, my mother called me over. That day, I had woken up a bit earlier than usual and had carefully combed my hair. It was the first day of the art club's exhibition. "Lindsay, make sure you come home by 3:30 today. You need to prepare dinner for your brother." Her words pierced my heart like cold ice. I had been up early, double-checking the art supplies I would bring and practicing my presentation in my mind. "But Mom, today is the start of the art clubs." Lindsay, her voice was tinged with its usual coldness. "Jonathan has important football practice. A growing boy needs proper nutrition, doesn't he? You should understand that." Jonathan, lounging on the living room sofa with the latest iPhone 16 in hand, sported a mean smirk. My phone was an old model, handed down from him. Sometimes it was even difficult to receive messages. "Come on, hurry off to school." Inside, I felt something being crushed. It might have been the sound of my dreams and aspirations being squashed under the weight of reality. My daily routine was completely predetermined. I woke up at 6 a.m. to prepare breakfast for the family, and as soon as I returned from school, I immediately started preparing Jonathan's dinner. On cold winter mornings, I would rub my sleepy eyes and stand in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the family. My hands were roughened and reddened from washing dishes and doing housework. I ironed Jonathan's clothes and sometimes even helped him with his homework. While solving math problems, I would think about my own homework. However, the time I could use for my studies always came late at night. Meanwhile, Jonathan could spend his after-school hours however he liked: football, debate club, programming classes. If he said he wanted to do something, our parents would immediately say, "Sure." They spared no expense for him. New spiked shoes, the latest laptop, private lessons. When I wanted to buy new stationery, my mother dismissed it with, "Don't be extravagant." In the midst of all this, my only sympathizer was my mother's sister, Hillary. Her home became my true sanctuary. On weekends, I would pedal across town on my old bicycle to my aunt's house. As I pedaled, I could feel my heart lightening. When I arrived at the entrance of her old brick house, my aunt was always waiting for me in the garden. "Ah, Lindsay," she would greet me with a warm smile. Her smile overflowed with genuine affection. We would sit at the garden table and have tea. "Lindsay, you have wonderful talents," she would say while looking at my report card. Her voice was filled with pure pride, especially in math and business skills. "These are special talents. You will surely find great opportunities in the future." Her words deeply resonated with me. These were words of recognition and encouragement, which I never heard at home. They planted a small seed of hope within me. However, as I entered high school, the situation worsened. Jonathan was accepted into one of the top business schools in the state. On the day of the announcement, our whole family went to see the school's notice board. The moment we found Jonathan's name, my mother cheered, and my father puffed out his chest proudly. On the spot, my father reserved a full-course meal at an upscale restaurant. My parents also planned an elaborate celebration at our home, inviting all our relatives. Most of the preparations, of course, fell on me: creating the invitations, arranging the food, decorating the venue. I ended up having to shoulder all these responsibilities. In the living room, a large banner reading "Congratulations, Jonathan" hung, and expensive catering food was laid out. From morning till night, I ran around following the caterer's instructions, serving and cleaning up. On the day of the celebration, our house overflowed with the voices of relatives. The pop of champagne corks, congratulatory words, and laughter filled the air. I moved between the kitchen and the living room, constantly serving the stream of dishes that kept coming. "He's our pride," my father repeated several times in a slightly drunken voice. Glass in hand, he passionately addressed the relatives. "Jonathan has been special since he was a child. A bright future awaits him in the business world. He will surely achieve great success." With tears of joy in her eyes, my mother showed off Jonathan's childhood album to the relatives. "Look, this is his picture at age 3. Even then, he was very smart," she boasted proudly. The album detailed Jonathan's growth. Photos of him winning first place at a sports day, his beaming face at a piano recital, happy expressions during family trips. However, my photos hardly appeared in any of the albums. If they did, I was just a small figure in the background. The following year, I was admitted to the State University's business school as the top applicant and also received a full scholarship for my academic excellence. On the day the results were announced, I went to check them alone. It seemed my family had no interest in the fact that I had applied to college. Other applicants were accompanied by their entire families. Feeling lonely and isolated, I headed to the venue. When I saw my name at the top of the list, I felt a warmth well up in my eyes. However, there was no one there to share my joy with. My acceptance letter was carelessly placed on a corner of the kitchen counter, barely noticeable among piles of bills and advertisements. It was several days later when my mother found it. "We saved on tuition," at least was all she said. There were no words of congratulations for my success. The only one who truly rejoiced at my achievement was my Aunt Hilary. When I informed her of my acceptance, she immediately took me out to celebrate. We quietly celebrated my success at the most stylish Italian restaurant in town. "Lindsay, your talents are special," my aunt said as she hugged me. "Business studies are the perfect choice for your logical thinking and creative ideas. You will surely become a great manager." Those words were deeply engraved in my heart. In her eyes shone true pride and affection. That night, we talked late into the night about the future. My aunt shared her experiences and discussed the possibilities for women in the business world. However, life is unpredictable. One day in my sophomore year, I received a call from my aunt. Her voice was weak, different from usual. "Lindsay." Her voice trembled even through the phone. "Can you come to the hospital?" I immediately left my lecture and took a taxi to the hospital. My heart was pounding, and my head was filled with anxiety. When I arrived at her hospital room, my aunt was lying in bed, her usually vibrant expression gone, her complexion pale. The doctor's diagnosis was grim. She had progressive cancer. She didn't have much time left. Hearing those words felt like my world had stopped. The days I spent in her hospital room became the most painful and precious times of my life. I spent as much time as possible with her between my lectures. Within her limited strength, my aunt taught me many things, from the basics of investing to the importance of decisions in life. "Remember, Lindsay," she said weakly, holding my hand one day, "the most important thing in investing is a long-term perspective. Don't be blinded by short-term gains. And above all, believe in yourself. No matter what others say, trust your own judgment." Her words were filled with the wisdom of life, not just about investing, but as a guideline for living. "Lindsay," she told me one quiet night, the moonlight streaming into the hospital room, "I'm leaving my estate to you. My house, my savings, everything. I believe you will use it well." I couldn't stop my tears. It was more than just an inheritance, it was a testament to her trust, expectations, and love. My aunt passed away on a calm spring morning, smiling at me until the end. After her death, the contents of the inheritance were revealed, and it was far beyond what I had imagined. It included a house in a quiet residential area, several real estate properties, and a significant amount of savings. She had built her wealth steadily over a long time, a testament to her prudence and foresight. When my parents learned of the inheritance I received, their attitude towards me changed dramatically. "Lindsay, we should have understood you better," my mother suddenly said one day, her tone unusually sweet. "You graduated top of your class, received a full scholarship for your excellent grades. You're smart and always think of the family first." It was a tone of voice I had never heard before. She had disregarded the day of my university acceptance announcement as trivial, barely even looking at the acceptance letter. I have not received any words of celebration. Perhaps we were wrong all along, my mother admitted. Suddenly, my father began to show interest in me, saying, "You really had great talent all along." Over the weekend, they invited me to dine at a fancy restaurant and even gifted me new clothes. I could only smirk inwardly at their calculative behavior. Their change in attitude was clearly not driven by genuine reflection, but by a clear interest in my inheritance. I cherished the words from my aunt, "Trust your own judgment." While majoring in business administration at university, I also obtained a qualification in real estate management. I invested the inheritance my aunt left me in my future. I stayed late in the library studying and attended real estate seminars on weekends. I dedicated all my time to my personal growth. I also spent time renovating my aunt's house. I replaced the old plumbing, enhanced the insulation, and updated the kitchen with the latest equipment. However, I made sure to preserve the garden she loved as much as possible in its original form. The rose bushes continued to bloom beautifully season after season. Sometimes, while tending to the garden, memories of my aunt would come flooding back. After graduation, I joined a major consulting firm. At work, I leveraged my strong analytical skills and soon led several large projects. I quickly gained the trust of clients and was promoted to the youngest manager in my 3rd year. I steadily built a solid track record in financial analysis, a field often deemed unsuitable for women. I also started investing in real estate, beginning with a small rental apartment and gradually expanding my portfolio. I faithfully adhered to the investment principles I learned from my aunt and steadily increased my assets. I was meticulous in selecting properties, efficient in renovations, and thorough in tenant management. My aunt's teachings were alive in every decision I made. By the age of 30, I had achieved complete financial independence. I had a stable income from both my job and investments, and gradually, my parents' interference lessened. Then one day, my brother Jonathan unexpectedly visited. I was reviewing work documents in the living room I had renovated when the doorbell rang on a fall afternoon. Peering through the peephole, I saw Jonathan dressed in an unfamiliar high-end suit, accompanied by a strikingly beautiful woman. As I opened the door, Jonathan wore an unusually humble expression, and a thin layer of sweat was visible on his forehead. "Hey, Lindsay," he said, his voice lacking its former arrogance and instead mixed with a somewhat contrived sweetness. "I need to talk to you." I invited them into the living room. The woman was dressed in a high-end brand dress and perfectly applied makeup, yet her eyes harbored a calculating look. As soon as she entered, her gaze assessed the expensive furniture and decorations. "This is my wife, Angela." Jonathan introduced her. Angela smiled politely, but the smile did not reach her eyes. I had received an invitation to their wedding but had chosen to abstain because I wanted to keep some distance from a family that only engaged with me for my assets. I sent a minimal monetary gift as a celebration, avoiding attending the milestones in my brother's life. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows twitched slightly, betraying a cold glint in her eyes. As I made coffee in the kitchen, Jonathan came over, leaving Angela behind. He began to speak cautiously, tapping the floor with his high-quality leather shoes and avoiding eye contact. "Lindsay, the truth is..." He paused, his voice tinged with desperation. "My company has gone bankrupt. I need a temporary place to stay." I could hardly hide my surprise. Jonathan had been flaunting a flashy success on social media after starting his business. Luxury cars, lavish vacations, and a glamorous wedding. The weekly posts depicted a life of a successful person. But was it all just for show? "How long is temporary?" I asked, maintaining my composure. Outside, the evening sky gradually changed color. 1 month, 2 at most. Jonathan responded quickly, his voice laced with urgency. "I'm setting up a new business. I'm close to sealing a deal with investors. Just need a place until then." Angela, left alone in the living room, silently examined her nails. Her expression clearly conveyed discomfort with the situation. Her meticulously groomed eyebrows were slightly furrowed. In the end, I agreed. It was a big mistake. The first week went by peacefully. However, gradually, a sense of discomfort began to grow. When I returned from work, I found remnants of expensive catered dinners scattered in the kitchen. Empty bottles of luxury wine were strewn about, and containers from desserts piled up. Angela's shopping bags accumulated at the entrance, and new brand-name clothes kept being added to the closet. Despite hearing that their stay was temporary, their lifestyle suggested no intention of keeping that promise. My past experiences enveloped me in a faint anxiety. One night, I received a call from my parents. "Lindsay, we need to discuss something." Her voice mixed the same tone she used when she used to impose housework on me. "It's about the charges on Jonathan and Angela's card." "Charges?" I frowned. I put down my pen and leaned back deeply in my chair. "Yes, it's about $3,000 a month," my mother continued as if it were obvious. "We gave them a family card. I heard you promised to cover their daily expenses, including dining out. They can't seem to stop dining at expensive restaurants or ordering luxury catering. And Angela seems to need new clothes, considering her position." Something inside me was about to snap. Emotions I had suppressed for years threatened to burst forth. "Mom, I made no such promise, not at all." But Jonathan said. "No matter what Jonathan says, I am not paying for their lavish food expenses." My voice was surprisingly strong. "The same goes for Angela's clothes." After hanging up, I confronted Jonathan. "I just got a call from Mom about your credit card charges," I said, and Jonathan visibly panicked. "Oh, that," he stuttered. Pressing him with the same firm tone I had used with my mother, he began to reveal the truth, perhaps because he had never been approached like this by me before, or perhaps because he felt guilty. He had lied to our parents, claiming I had agreed to cover all their living expenses. "Lindsay, things are really tough right now." Jonathan started making excuses. He loosened his designer tie, his demeanor frantic. "I haven't been able to tell Angela about the bankruptcy." "What?" I exclaimed, my voice raising in anger and surprise, feeling the atmosphere in the room freeze. "You haven't told your wife the truth." Jonathan turned his face away, his expensive suit collar beginning to dampen with sweat. "She's accustomed to a certain standard of living. If she knew the truth, she..." At that moment, I understood. Jonathan had lied to his wife, deceived our parents, and was trying to use me. To maintain appearances and hide his bankruptcy, he had been presenting my house as his own to his wife. Angela was not aware that this house was mine. She thought it was okay to charge extravagant dining expenses to my parents and treated my home as if it were their own. Even my home office was overflowing with her cosmetics and clothes. If this continued, it wasn't just my home at risk, but my salary and assets as well. I needed to take action immediately. I knew it was best to create physical distance from them. I had to stop the interference in my home office too. I decided to take early retirement. My real estate income was stable, and I had sufficient savings. When I began planning a trip around the world, perhaps worried about living expenses, Angela haughtily said, "We need to talk." Her eyes gleamed coldly beneath her perfect makeup. "You're retiring? Just because you live here for free doesn't mean you can slack off now." "Free? Slack off. You seem to cover everything but rent yourself. If you lose your job, you'll probably end up relying on Jonathan for living expenses. Maybe you should start paying rent from now on, $2,000 a month. I think that's a reasonable request from the owner of this house." I couldn't help but laugh. "Angela, you're mistaken. I own this house. Jonathan has been lying to you." It seemed Jonathan still hadn't told her the truth. Right then, Angela called Jonathan on her phone. Her voice demanding the truth echoed loudly through the quiet house. "I can't tolerate you living this luxurious life. Angela stood at the front door, trembling with anger as she confronted me. Her hands, clutching a high-end brand bag, were visibly shaking. "This house is mine. I have rights to it. From the moment I married Jonathan, this became my right." However, I had gained the strength to not succumb to anyone's demands anymore. Angela's aggressive words no longer instilled fear in me. The days spent with my aunt and the career I had built for myself gave me solid confidence. "Leave," I told her quietly but firmly, "and do not come back. This is my house, a precious place entrusted to me by my aunt." Seemingly at a loss for words, Angela stormed out of the house. The sound of her high heels striking the flooring resonated behind her. No longer would I let anyone control my life. I choose my own path. My resolve was unshakable. I have no intention of relinquishing this house to anyone. A few weeks later, I heard that Angela had filed for divorce. Jonathan did not return to my house, nor did he move back in with Angela, so I sent all his belongings to my parents' house. But it wasn't over yet. My parents and Jonathan began demanding that I give up the house to them. "As a sister, you should help your brother," my mother said. "We're family," my father added. "You've ruined my life," Jonathan accused. I ignored all their communications and proceeded with the round-the-world trip I had planned. Upon returning, I started a small-scale real estate consulting firm, focusing particularly on programs that support women's financial independence. I want to pass on to the next generation what my aunt did for me by supporting women in circumstances similar to mine. Becoming a business owner helped me see through Jonathan's lies. Despite claiming he was preparing for a new business, it was impossible for Jonathan, with his damaged credit, to start a venture. He must have known he had no future, but didn't want to let go of his beautiful wife and tried to prolong the inevitable. He relied on me for a place to live and borrowed family credit cards from our parents. Lacking business acumen, I was deceived by Jonathan's careless lies. Through my real estate consulting firm, I reconnected with a local friend who updated me on my family's current situation. According to my friend, Jonathan was working at a small company in a rural area. My friend saw him walking away, dressed in a cheap suit, looking worn out, a far cry from the man who once wore expensive suits. After being kicked out of my house, Jonathan and Angela's lives spiraled downwards rapidly. They moved to a luxury hotel, but soon their credit card limits were reached, and they couldn't make payments. The fact that the house was in my name and their credit cards were maxed out was enough to fuel Angela's suspicions. As soon as she learned of Jonathan's bankruptcy, she disappeared with expensive jewelry and clothes she had accumulated. It later turned out she had already been scouting for another wealthy man. During the divorce, Angela demanded compensation, but Jonathan no longer had the means to pay. Furious, she took to social media to expose details of Jonathan's mismanagement. It seems to have made the news and become a topic of discussion. The repercussions gradually spread, leading to lawsuits from investors. Jonathan's name was completely discredited in the industry due to accusations of fraudulent management. On the other hand, Angela was unable to achieve the kind of high-class marriage she had hoped for. As she aged, her once radiant skin, ravaged by a life of luxury, had lost its youthful glow. Above all, a woman who exposed her husband's misconduct on social media in hopes of compensation was shunned by wealthy men. Angela had to pawn her high-end luxury items to maintain her lavish lifestyle, but eventually she was forced to live alone in a cheap apartment. Jonathan's downfall also affected our parents. They had invested their retirement funds in his business ventures. Caught up in bankruptcy and lawsuits, my parents lost their retirement savings and were forced to move to a small apartment in the suburbs. I hear they've become reclusive, avoiding the curious eyes of their neighbors. Angela now hops from job to job as a receptionist at beauty clinics. Her once haughty demeanor has vanished, and she often finds herself apologizing to clients and apologizing to her bosses daily. On social media, the friends who once praised Jonathan are now making light of his downfall. Comments on Angela's posts are filled with sarcasm. The photos from their lavish wedding have become a subject of mockery. My company continues to grow steadily, and we sometimes receive media coverage from newspapers and business magazines. Jonathan might have seen those articles. Hearing about my family from friends feels like a story from a distant past now. I was once caught up in my family, but having overcome various trials, I feel a sense of complete independence. Beautiful flowers still bloom in the garden of my house. This place, inherited from my aunt, is my pride and a symbol of my strength. It is a precious place I have protected from my brother and his wife, and from my family. Sometimes I feel lonely, but I accept it as the price of freedom. True family is not necessarily about blood relations. Perhaps it is the bonds with those who understand and support each other that truly define family. Your value is not determined by others. This was my aunt's words that continue to live on in my heart.